Welcome back to the 40 Acres Football Podcast. Once again, joined by Robert Gonsel and Joseph Duffy. It's a different type of episode this week. Obviously, we all would have loved for Texas to have won and headed to the national championship, but that didn't happen. So let's get right into it. Cotton Bowl reactions. Immediately when I saw that Jack Sawyer strip, I knew it was over. Like the second the ball came out of his hands, I knew if he picked it up, he was gone. Even if he fell on it, the chances of Texas getting the ball back and scoring a touchdown with less than 2 minutes to go was pretty slim given the way the game had gone. But that was just a devastating play. What were y'all's live reactions? Robert, you were at the game, correct?
Correct. I was there. I was there. It was a little tough to watch just because you see the team get multiple chances to take momentum and they don't. And then you get to see the team with the chance to actually tie the game and maybe get momentum at the very end and they go all the way down to the 1 yard line and you just yes, the Jack Sawyer strip sack was the game sealer, but I was looking at the play calling right before with why is Texas lateraling it out to the side at second and goal from the one? Why not just run it straight up the middle and go vertically, not laterally? That's what everyone those are the voices of people in the stadium.
Oh, I think those are the voices of everyone watching. That was probably the worst play call I have seen in the Steve Sarkisian era at Texas, if I'm going to be completely honest. Joe,
I
what
mean, it was a play calling disaster class in that last drive. I mean, you were moving the ball effectively. It was probably the best drive for the Longhorns at the time. I should say the quickest one because obviously they scored with those Jaden Blue touchdowns, but you were moving the ball more effectively against that great front seven, better than a lot of previous drives on that drive. And you get to the 1 yard line, and of course, Fowler and Herbstreit are hyping up the red zone defense of the Buckeyes, which is sensational. We know this is phenomenal. They stop it on the first play and first and goal. You're gonna have to kill me to not run the ball 4 straight times up the gut. I don't care how good your run defense is. If you're gonna talk about how you have an all gas, no brakes approach, why are you getting all cute and fancy after one stop? Especially when you bring in a big guy. I'm expecting that you're gonna run it up the gut again and again. Not, run a toss towards the left when you're outmanned, by the way. And I would think that, Quinn Ewers is gonna check that play call. Because when you look on the left side, I know Caleb Downs is a star, but when you look on the left side, I mean they had more defenders on that left side compared to who the Texas Longhorns had receiver wise and O-line wise. So once you saw that, you probably should have anticipated that there's not a great chance to even have a successful play off of that toss. So I don't understand what was going on with that play call. I can't even like fathom it still. It's been I think a week now, almost a week, officially a week today since that play call. I completely don't understand it still. He's still having nightmares about that. There's just no way Steve Sarkisian is not regretful of that. And I don't know if I've seen any accountability off of it since. I really don't know if I've seen it yet. And you would think that, again, for a guy who's trying to push this all gas, no brakes approach, that you'd hear some kind of accountability so far from it, but I don't know if we've heard that yet. And like I said, you're going to kill me 4 times, not run the ball up the gut. And you have some draftable O linemen as well. Why not trust them? Why not try to run this fancy toss with Trey Wisner, by the way? Um, was it Trey Wisner? Was it? I think it was Trey Wisner, right? It wasn't
yeah,
Blue. I don't.
so I believe it
Yeah,
was.
I
with
think it
Trey
was Wisner who was in
Trey
the game.
Wisner, by the way, who's now one of our, fastest backs, by the way, to run a play like that. He's not exactly like laterally speedy. I just don't understand it. So very upset by that call, and it really was a microcosm of how this offense has been. so far this year and how the red zone offense has been specifically. It's a shocker in the Sarkisian era that we're still dealing with this issue, but it's a poor end to the season in my opinion. But overall, it was a great season.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I uh I felt like that's a play call that you make if you still have Bijan Robinson, and that's about the only guy that you make that play call with. And like you said, Joe, when Texas got to the line of scrimmage, Ohio State had what, five guys in the box? They had their four down D linemen, and then I think they had one linebacker um, over the tight end on the right side, and everyone else was matched up with with an offensive player on the left side. And I felt like if you were ever going to run a play there, it had to be directly up the middle. And I've never understood why teams, Texas specifically, don't see that and immediately get under center and just run a QB sneak because you got three more downs. So the only plays, and I said this at the game, I said this after the game, the only plays where you could lose significant yardage and put yourself in a bad position is a toss and if you pass the ball and you get sacked. Those are the only plays you can lose significant yardage. Yeah, sure, there's a world where you run it up the middle, someone gets blasted at the line of scrimmage, you lose a couple yards. But this Texas O line probably doesn't let that happen. Maybe you lose a yard. Yeah, sure. But the only plays you lose significant yardage and put yourself so far behind the eight ball that you come up with the third down and fourth down play that Texas had to, try to scrape together was if you toss it out wide or you take a sack. And so it felt like I said earlier, the worst play call that I've seen in the Steve Sarkisian era. And I'm sure he hasn't slept like you said, and I'm sure he knows that that was not the right play call. I mean, he talked about after the game, you think you have a numbers advantage if it's blocked right. Um, Theoretically, you should score, but I don't think you ever had a numbers advantage.
He
That's my
never had
main
it.
problem.
No
well,
accountability.
I don't know if it was that Sarkisian was getting a little deja vu from having bad red zone offenses this entire season, or thinking about what happened at the 1 yard line against Oklahoma last year when they lost and they didn't convert on that drive. But I mean, everything other than the Gunnar Helm penalty, excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the woes of this team. Dude, the red zone has been why this team has lost in these past couple of years. It comes down to the red zone, like you were saying.
I had a little technical difficulties there. No, I was just saying. Sorry about that. I was just saying, like, I don't know if it was that you were not as confident in your red zone offense to score from the 1 yard line, but everything on that drive, other than the Gunnar Helm penalty, was going right for Texas. And Joe, I have to agree with you. That was definitely their quickest drive of the game. You get set back 15 yards with the Gunnar Helm unsportsmanlike call, but then you hit Matthew Golden out on the out route about a play later and get the first down. And suddenly that penalty doesn't matter. But when you get to about first and goal from the 5, and then you have two straight penalties called not against you, called for you on pass interference calls. That bumps you all the way up to the 1. So I think Texas had a first and goal attempt not once but twice. And yes, the first and goal attempt didn't work, but you didn't lose yards on that play. Run it again. And also, if the thing is, like you were saying, Goose, four of these 5-0 linemen are going to the draft this year. Two of them are going to be first rounders. One of them could be going, the last one could have been going to the draft, but he's just choosing to stay behind in DJ Campbell. You have obviously a great O line. All you need is 1 yard. Maybe that inside run wasn't working for you as well during the entire game, but you're not trying to get 5 yards here. You're only trying to get one. And also, yes, if you're going to run up the middle, Yes, I would have put in Wisner. I would have done it with Wisner. That's who I would have gone. But if you're Sark, and I doubt that this is what he was thinking, but if you're Sark and you were still so confident in that second and goal pitch play, I almost would have preferred Jaden Blue to be in for that game, for that specific play call. Only reason I say that is because of how shifty Jaden Blue has been and the way he's been able to work in open space. I we saw him make a man miss on his second touchdown to get it in the end zone. Now, Caleb Downs, he's a great ball player. He may have made the tackle again. He may have not. We don't know. But if you want to die on the hill of that running that play call, I would have rather put in Jaden Blue than Weiser, just given to how he can make his cuts. And maybe he makes a man miss, and maybe he gets back to the 1 yard line. Who knows? Caleb Downs is a great player, but all comes to say is, I think that Sark, I don't know if he was having deja vu from not being able to punch it in the Clemson and OU game or all season, but you can't let your prior experiences get to you during a game and affect your play calling. Not saying that's what happened, but it kind of seems like it, you know?
I mean, the funniest thing was people were saying, I wouldn't even run that in the college football game or Madden. I mean, it's mind-numbingly crazy. I don't understand it. I really don't. Gets my blood boiling. It felt like a therapy session how we're all just ranting and raving about this right now.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say we'll probably try and move on from this in a sec because I think we could go on and on and on. One of the things I was surprised about throughout kind of the whole college football playoff after the Clemson game was Steve Sarkisian has typically gone with the hot hand at running back this season. Um, and Jaden Blue has had a phenomenal college football playoff, but we didn't see a whole lot of him in the run game against Arizona State and against Ohio State. And I felt like coming off of the Clemson game, we would have seen a little bit more of that. I know he's had his ball security issues. I don't know if that has frayed a little bit of that trust between him and Steve Sarkisian, but it it's really surprising to me that we didn't see more of him in the run game. I really thought we would have. He's so explosive, and the way he had played against Clemson, the way he had played down the stretch of the season, I really thought we were going to start to see more of him in that run game.
I mean, I understand this Ohio State run defense is spectacular, but I could say the same. I really did expect to see him a little bit more. It really wasn't Trey Wisner's day, clearly. The run game clearly was not firing off on all cylinders, really, until the second half. It started to look a little bit better, but especially in the first half, there was just nothing there. And credit to the front seven and Jim Knowles of the Ohio State Buckeyes. I mean, their defense was playing sensational the entire game. Of course, Jack Sawyer. They had some injury trouble too as well, but they found a way to work around that, like they've done all season, even on the offensive line. They found a way to adjust and just play well, even on defense. So. Credit to them, but I did expect to see more Jaden Blue touches on the ground because if he's your hot hand, especially through the air, why not give him more chances on the ground as well? I was not expecting both touchdowns to come from him, by the way, on the same routes almost, the same wheel on the left side. But, if you're going to get those touchdowns, why not go with the hot hand? Why not give him a few more handoffs? And I was kind of expecting more, like you were saying.
Yeah, I'm not an offensive specialist, so I'm not trying to critique football coaches who are offensive gurus and know exactly what they're doing when they're running plays or utilizing their players. But yes, if Jaden Blue is so good on the catch and run, why not use him straight off in the backfield? I think Texas was doing that initially before Jaden Blue started fumbling a lot. But yes, that's an issue of concern. But it really seemed like he cleaned it up. I don't know. Fumbling to me is one of those issues where it's like it's a yes, it happens, but it's a quick fix. I don't think it's nearly a mental issue as it is with catching a football or it is with maybe getting the right throws. You're just trying to hold on as tight as you can. And so I don't. Yes, Jane Blue fumbled a lot from true run plays earlier this season, but if we were to continue running him on the ground this game, I don't really think he would have fumbled. I think he's cleaned up that issue, and so yeah, I don't know why he wasn't getting more touches from the backfield. Now, it's interesting. It's interesting because I was talking about his shiftiness, the way he's able to make a man miss. You can look at plays all over from this season. The Ohio State, his second touchdown, his play against Michigan, where he just made a man miss in the back when he was going upfield. But enough of that being said, I just feel like this. I'm kind of getting into a different topic here, so I'll tread lightly here. But him going to the draft, I think is due in part because he has the talent, yes, but he really upped his draft stock in the college football playoffs. If he doesn't have that performance against Clemson or Ohio State, I think he might be doing something differently. And I do think he does have the talent. I just didn't think the film was all there yet, and I think the playoffs really helped him. I think um, him going is for the team itself, for the team itself. Jaden Blue going to the draft is good for Texas because one, the obvious, it clears up running back room for CJ Baxter, Trey Wisner. You have Christian Clark coming back, and I may be missing another. Oh, and Gibson, Jarrett Gibson. It clears up more room for those guys. And two, one reason I'm really focusing on here is Jaden Blue going to the draft is also good for Texas's resume. With all the backs they've sent in the past with Bijan Robinson, Roshan Johnson, Keelan Robinson, Jonathan Brooks, all of those backs going to the draft, and then you have this all five of these players plus Jalen Blue in this one photo, and it's like Jalen Blue's the one guy left who needs to go to the draft in this viral photo of them on the bench, and we all thought he might have transferred, or we all thought he was gonna stay another year and not get as many reps. This was supposed to be his year. Him going to the draft this year is good for Texas's running back room development, what it can show to recruits who are looking at Texas and just say, yeah, you only need about a year, maybe 2 seasons to maybe yeah, probably 2 seasons to get your reps in and you can go to the league. It's good for running back recruits looking at Texas.
And more specifically, I mean, when you look at that, it reminds me a little bit of those wide receiver pictures that you saw in Alabama in the past. Not to that same degree, but if you can produce talent that quickly, that is a great representation of the university for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, I think he's got a spot in the NFL. I think it reminds me a little bit of Jeremy McNichols for Washington. Much more of a receiving back, a lot of burst. Can definitely handle the ball in the backfield as a speedy guy. But immediately following that Cotton Bowl, obviously there's a lot of talk about Quinn Ewers. So I want to get your thoughts. I sure am opinionated on this subject. His legacy as a Longhorn. It's one that's debated. It's one that's still contested right now. Um, so Joe, I'll start with you. How do you feel he should be remembered, and how do you feel he's going to be remembered?
Uh, this is a tough one because I have some thoughts about Quinn Ewers, a lot of them, but I'll keep it concise. I think that he should be remembered as a very good quarterback in Texas football history. Um, but I really don't think that with our class, the youngsters that the people who are actually in college while he played, um, will I think he'll be slightly overrated by our standards. I'll say that. It depends on who you ask, to be honest. I'm probably going against the grain in our class. The people who were actually watched him while actually attending the University of Texas at the same time. I think our class was slightly overrate him. And I base it on how he was recruited, not recruited, how he was rated while he was being recruited. And that's not his fault. It's not at all because he was just a solid player that came from a great school in DFW. He was a five-star recruit, obviously, the highest recruit since Vince Young himself. Do I believe he lived up to that standard of what we saw? Almost there. I mean, if you told me a few years ago that Texas would move to the SEC and Texas would have an SEC berth and he'd win a Big 12 title and he'd compete for all these records in Texas QB lore, I'd be really pleased. But when I think about some of those throws, man, and some of those the interceptions and silly turnovers, it kind of makes me feel like there was some meat left on the bone and he could have done even more. And of course, he had all those injuries too that he dealt with. We've heard from Steve Sarkisian that he is a fighter, that he's dealt with a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And I appreciate that for sure. But I feel like he's going to be graded a little bit more overrated based on our generation.
I think Quinn Ewers, from a whole Texas Longhorn fan base standpoint, should be remembered as a quarterback that brought them, played a major role in bringing them out of, some low times, in the 2000 early from the 2010s decades to the early 2020s, brought them out of a low time when you're going through multiple head coaching changes, you're going through an 8-5, you're going with an 8-5 ceiling or a 5 and or a 5-7 floor. That's what Quinn Ewers walked into at Texas, and I think he should be remembered as a major key to getting them out of that standard. I think, you know, yes, it is very hard for Steve Sarkisian or any head coach in college football to get there their first year and lead a team to the college football playoffs or lead a team to a New Year's Six Bowl. It's hard. That is hard. And so I get it when Sarkisian doesn't do as well his very first year at Texas and goes 5-7 with Hudson Card and Casey Thompson. I understand that. And yes, you don't do as better next year, but you do a little bit better with Quinn Ewers. But who's to say that with if people now, Sarkisian has done so many great things for the Texas football program. He has, without a doubt, brought Texas to the college football playoffs and has changed the program. It's the best it's been since the Colt McCoy days. It is. It is. But if people are going to take, if people are going, here's my thing about this. If people are going to shift all of the credit away from Quinn Ewers and put it all on Sark, then at the same time, why are people questioning Sarkisian's play calling so much? Why are they doing that? So it's either they're critiquing Quinn for the plays he's doing, but then they're critiquing Sark for the play calling. And so let's just stick with Sark's play calling for now. Quinn stepped in there at quarterback for 3 seasons. This last one was probably his shakiest at Texas, but he stepped in there for 3 seasons and he played his best. He played great. He brought Texas to two back-to-back college football playoff semifinal games. He did that with Sarkisian's play calling. So I would say that, he should be remembered as, a player who won them three of their biggest rivalry games, two at OU, one at A&M. He brought them back to a Big 12 championship title for the first time since the Colt McCoy days. He beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. I'd say his second year was probably his best year, but you know, Sarkisian, great coach. He's doing a wonderful job at Texas. You cannot argue with that. But if people have been saying, what they've been a little questionable with Sarkisian's play calling, then you got to give credit to Quinn Ewers for at least helping bring the team back with that play calling to the semifinals. I think he's going to be. Yes, he had a pretty, because of this last season and it was shakier. I understand it was shakier, and he did not have his best season at Texas in 2024. But I because of that, I think he's going to be remembered as, you know, a quarterback who didn't live up to the full expectations or standards that fans had for him. And I think that might have been because of who was in the wing waiting for him and Arch Manning. Um, I think Arch will have been better when it's all said and done, but I think, yes, it was Quinn's time to play. This was Quinn's time to play. And I think there was just a lot of pressure that I think there's a lot of pressure that just may blur or the image a little bit of how Quinn should have been looked at when in reality he stepped up when it mattered most and you know brought Texas fans some pretty good moments for the first time in about 13 years. But I don't know if he'll be viewed as that fully.
Yeah, I think Quinn in my lifetime, the quarterbacks that I can actually remember, this does not include Vince Young. Um, Quinn is the second greatest Longhorn quarterback that I've ever watched behind Colt McCoy. And you go and you look at all-time Longhorn passing records, Quinn is third or fourth in almost every single one, all-time passing yards, season passing yards. Um, passing touchdowns in a game. He's tied for second in single season passing touchdowns. He's third, one touchdown behind Sam Ellinger. And one of the things that is really, uh, really standing out to me is the fact that not only did he get injured in every single season, but this past season, he had to come back and play for an offense that had very few returning skill players. Um, if any, really. Obviously, you still had Gunnar Helm, but Jatavion Sanders was your tight end last year that you went to all the time. And so that's something that a lot of people are not really taking into consideration. You have a entirely new receiving core and running back room, and you get hurt early in the season when that chemistry is supposed to be developed. And so then you head into SEC play and you're still trying to develop that chemistry, and it doesn't really click right away. And later in the season, it started to get a lot better. But that's something that if Quinn doesn't get hurt, I think we're seeing a totally different offense down the stretch of the season. Obviously, that's all hypothetical. But in my opinion, Quinn lived up to the standard. And you don't get a national championship. That's always what you want. But it's really damn hard to win a national championship in college football these days. How many teams have done it multiple times outside of Georgia and Alabama? How many teams have done it one time in the college football playoff era? How many teams have gone to the college football playoff multiple times and not made it to a national championship? It's incredibly difficult to win a national championship in college, and that's exactly why I feel like he lived up to the standard. It's tough for sure. There are going to be people that next year, when Arch Manning steps in and inevitably plays fantastic football, will still circle back to this argument. And there are going to be people next year when Arch inevitably plays a bad quarter or a bad game will step back and say that Quinn Ewers was better than Arch Manning. And so this entire narrative, like you said, Robert, is really clouded Quinn Ewers' time at Texas. But I do think he lived up to the standard. I think he was instrumental in bringing Texas back. And I don't think Texas is going anywhere anytime soon, especially as long as you have Steve Sarkisian recruiting. Um, so those are my thoughts on Quinn Ewers. I think he had a phenomenal Texas career. I think injuries really hurt him. But in the end, a Longhorn quarterback that will forever be remembered as the guy who brought Texas back to the national stage.
Yeah, and I can agree with a good amount of that. And it is a good thing to note that he did have a whole completely different offense this year. I mean, those guys were phenomenal last year. Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell and Jatavion Sanders. That was a really solid core that's departed as well. But I do like what Robert was also saying. Like, you have to recognize a lot of pieces that went into this rebuild of Texas football. And that is the Quinn Ewers effect. It's also Steve Sarkisian. It's also this amazing defense who I thought was wasted this year. And in the end, by not, you find a way to really stymie Jeremiah Smith, who was having a tear in the college football playoff, and you still find a way to only put up 14 points on the board. And so the reason why I say that he's not, or that he did not live up completely to what he was billed, it's just hard for me to imagine that the way that I've reacted to some of his missed throws, to some of his, like, for example, the A&M game. That to me was a microcosm of the Quinn Ewers era. And I know he fought his tail off with that bad ankle. I know he did, but I feel like in some plays in that game, that you just saw a lot of those goofy turnovers again. And I thought that a lot of those turnovers you saw, though, I think he threw one in almost like five, six consecutive games. Um, I know he had a great final stat line, though, of 31 touchdowns, 12 picks in the year. I thought that he left some meat on the bone, especially this year, because like Robert was saying, his second season was, in my opinion, his best season. And I thought that he was going to take a little bit more of a higher step. And I don't know if we got that this year. I think we got the same guy from really last year with not much improvement. I thought his pocket presence was not nearly as great this year again, dealt with injuries, to be honest, but I really thought that he left some meat on the bone in his career. And, I'll cherish him. He was a great quarterback for Texas. He was a great guy to lead this rebuild, but I felt like I could have seen a little bit more. And, he did a great job, and I can't really complain too much about what he's done. He's taking the Texas Longhorns to two straight college football playoff berths, but I feel like there could have been a little bit more as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer one more point real quick. Joe, I like what you said about the A&M game, like you made some goofy plays, some goofy mistakes where the game, quite honestly, could have been a 24-0 game or a 27-0 game without the Quinn Ewers pick six, without the fumble. Who knows? Because they were in the red zone when those two turnovers happened. I will say, the yes. So I feel like the A&M game was definitely a you got two extremes of Quinn Ewers. You got his sloppy mistakes that he made in the second half, but what gets to me the most about the A&M game is that in the first half, I thought you were getting second season Quinn Ewers. That's what I thought I was getting second season at Texas Quinn Ewers in the first half of the A&M game. And I honestly I thought he was got his confidence back. I thought the injury wasn't affecting him. We saw him hit deep balls to Matthew Golden. We saw him throw across his shoulder to Ryan Wingo. We saw him, on the deep crosses. We saw him throw upfield and run the ball too. And that's the first half. And then the second half comes around and you get this season's Quinn Ewers with the turnovers. I just thought it was two different extremes, and that's what I think will hurt. That's what will cloud people's view of Quinn Ewers at Texas is like there are always times where he kind of slipped in an interception at the end of the game, and people have tended to focus on that. But I was just gonna say like Arch Manning. I think it's different with Arch Manning given the talent and the hype around him and how excited people are for him. But Goose, you inevitably said, or you said inevitably, Arch Manning will have a bad quarter. That comes with every quarterback. Who's to say that now I know Arch is different because of all the hype and excitement and just how long people have been waiting for him. But who's to say that people won't be cheering for KJ Lacey's name or Trey Owens' name when Arch has a tough game. I'm not saying that's going to happen. That'll happen less than it happened with Quinn Ewers, but if we all know how Texas fans are, all know that they'll criticize. As a whole fan base of millions of people, there are people who will criticize a lot. I mean, myself, I criticize as a Texas fan all the time. Who's to say that not one person from those millions and millions of people in the fan base who's to say that they won't find criticisms.
I think, yeah, I mean, there's going to be a ton of goalpost moving as soon as Arch Manning comes into the game. That's inevitable. I think the people that were calling for him when Quinn was the starter will absolutely move the goalposts if Arch has a bad quarter or a bad game. Um, but it's also going to be impossible to bench Arch Manning. You just can't do it. You waited for him for 2 years. Um, Nobody behind him is experienced enough or talented enough, in my opinion, to come into the game. This was a little bit of a different dynamic, I felt like. But overall, I still think that Quinn Ewers needs to get the credit that he deserves for what he did for Texas football. There were a lot of guys that entered the draft. We're going to talk more about that next week. A whole lot of turnover on this Texas roster, offensively, defensively. You got some key guys coming back, but we don't know exactly where those other pieces are going to fit in, who's going to emerge as a top talent on this 2025-2026 roster. But it's the Arch Manning era, and we're going to embrace it heading into next football season. That's going to do it for the 40 Acres Football Podcast here today. For Justin Gooseman, Joseph Duffy, and Robert Gonsolin, we'll see y'all next week to talk more about what we'll see for the next 3 or 4 years of Texas football.